when I got the whole concept, the true concept of perception as projection, I was horrified because I was an incredibly judgmental and intolerant individual. But when I looked at that younger version of myself, I realized I did only two emotions incredibly well. I did fun and laughter incredibly well, and I did frustration and anger incredibly well. Other emotions I didn't even know I had.
The Connect Coaching Unplugged.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Connect Unplugged podcast number 10, where we have the magnificent Colin McKay from the UK. Colin he's a very, very good friend of Connect Coaching. He's been a personal friend of mine since 2007, I think, is when we first spoke. And Colin was actually very influential in my early years of sales when I really started to craft and hone in on my craft. And Callum and I, as you know, always like to bring on quality to our podcasts. And literally this morning, we've had a very busy week, and we felt that it was time that we brought Colin to our podcast and displayed him to the world and let many other people get tuned into what makes not only Colin excellent at what he does, but also Colin, like Callum and myself, has made a big impact in the world. He's helped thousands of people realize their true potential, and for me and for Callum, it's incredibly motivational to rub shoulders with people who have aligned thinking and want to make an impact like they do in the world, like we do. So, without further ado, welcome Colin to the podcast number 10, Connect Unplugged podcast number 10.
Lovely to see you both, and thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. Colin Colin has two companies over there in the UK. One is called Life Training Systems, which focuses on training and coaching development, and the other one is Advanced Team Dynamics, which specializes and focuses on the corporate side. So you have a number of international corporate clients who you help in the leadership, in the sales, in the management department. And today, I guess, Callum, it's to unplug a little bit about your background, how you got into this industry, how you managed to navigate your way here, and how on earth did you end up at 10:15 at night talking to Callum and myself on our podcast. So yeah, can you unpack a little bit about you? You're obviously Scottish, but I know you used to live in New Zealand, and that's where we first spoke.
I like to claim both. I will always be Scottish when the All Blacks are playing. When the Rugby World Cup is on, I'm a New Zealander through and through. Yes, I lived in New Zealand and was in the printing industry. So that was my career. I had worked my way up from being a printer to print production management, ultimately general management, sales management. And what brought me into the world of NLP through many books, courses, most of them recordings. In those days, it was cassettes.
Oh yeah,
It was a long time ago. I read a lot of Bandler's books, which, for those of you out there that have read Bandler's books, some of them are great, some of them are not the easiest to digest. And that inspired me to look to study more. I was, to be honest, and I like to be honest, I did start studying it for the wrong reasons. I felt on the back foot in the world I was within. I was under a lot of stress, under a lot of pressure, and I was looking for an edge. I was looking for a power over, which we all now know is the wrong way to go about it. Because I was looking for the best, there was an arrogance about me as a younger man. There was people that did train in New Zealand, none of which I rated. And through a lot of investigation, I found the company that I end up training, company where I first met you, Colin.
Oh, yeah.
Um, Tad was obviously a name that was in the industry that was up there, and I wanted to make sure I got a quality training that would be appropriate for a corporate world. I, at that age, didn't have any problems. I was perfect in every way. So I didn't believe there was, so therapy, coaching, counseling wasn't something I required. I just
Yeah.
needed skills, tools. I wanted to have control, and I wanted to be able to be predictably influential.
Mm.
So that's what brought me into it.
So it was all outside of you. Everything, all solutions were outside of you, and all problems were
Yeah.
outside of
Yeah, and they were there for me to get a handle on, get an understanding of, and control, and to a certain degree, manipulate, I suppose.
you.
You could.
Mm.
I didn't view it as manipulation, but that's probably what it was.
Yeah, I sold a lot of courses, and the education that comes with selling people into courses such as hypnotherapy and NLP and communication skills. You sometimes do need to rewire why they're coming in, and sort of set clear boundaries around that. But this is new, Colin. I never knew that that's
I,
when we
I, I actually I make sure I share that with all of my students
Mm,
when I'm trainings, when I'm doing corporate work. It's good for people to understand sometimes we have the wrong motivation.
mm,
And sometimes the motivation has a deep rooted fear that's associated to it. So my study was very much driven by and away from. I was not clever enough or experienced enough to know that at the time.
Well, for the uninitiated, can you maybe unpack a little bit deeper about a couple of those things? For example, the switch in your head that was made after you started to train, and what you know now around it being a do with process, and also what it means when we talk about towards and away from, because this is I guess, a story arc that continues through some of these podcasts that we're having at the moment as we're speaking to a lot of highly trained professionals in this arena around towards and away from motivation, whether there's ever a space for look away from motivation, or if it's more
Yeah. Well, thank goodness for away from motivation, because away from motivation actually probably in the pantheon of success, away from motivation probably has created the impetus that has led to more success than anything else.
Mm.
The problem that most people have is they're not aware of it. You know, we talk about conscious awareness and unconscious awareness. Most people are not consciously aware of their unconscious drivers. And most people do think the world is doing it to them in some way, shape, or form. The key is that the trainings in of themselves, the skills that were held within NLP and the other emotional models and hypnosis, allow somebody to get more in touch with these unconscious drivers. What was a massive game changer for me was the whole perception projection model,
Mm.
and understanding nothing's real. None of it's real. All of my students, you can't even say now in now because it's not now anymore.
Thinking about perception as projection, coming back to your first point of getting into the field because you wanted to have control over things external. Understanding perception as projection is funny because it's the pathway to that, but the pathway is actually inwards rather than outwards.
I was horrified. I was truly horrified when I got the whole concept, the true concept of perception as projection. I was horrified because I was an incredibly judgmental and intolerant individual. But when I looked at that younger version of myself, I realized I did only two emotions incredibly well. I did fun and laughter incredibly well. And I did frustration and anger incredibly well. Other emotions I didn't even know I had. I certainly wasn't in a position where I was mature enough or educated enough to be able to actually acknowledge the other emotions that functioned for me and were a major unconscious driver of a lot of my behaviors.
So within what time frame was it when you sort of started to wake up or become conscious of all of this?
Practitioner.
Yeah.
Because of the timings for practitioner, because I chose to do a practitioner in Australia,
Mm.
again, the closed arrogance that I function from, I didn't believe there's anybody nearly good enough to train me in New Zealand.
In New Zealand.
So Australia was the only place I could go. In the meantime, to fill time, I enrolled myself in a clinical hypnotherapy training. Because of the books I'd read and the study I'd already done, I was sensible enough to understand that NLP is based in hypnosis.
Mhm.
I was clever enough to understand everybody's in trance all the time.
Mm.
It's just the level of trance that varies. Reality needs you to be in trance. It's the whole deletion, distortion, generalization model of meta model. So that side of it, I thought, well, I may as well learn about hypnosis. Now, and I did that training, believe it, I want to learn hypnosis, but I'm not going to be hypnotized. I'm not going to be hypnotized. You wouldn't be able to hypnotize me, but I'm going to learn how to do it to others. And it was probably, and by the way, the training was, but there was enough nuggets of gold within it to start the change in the way I perceived my reality and the reality I was choosing to experience. And probably on about the fifth weekend, it was one of these one
Weekend ones.
weekend a month.
Yeah.
On probably the fourth or the fifth weekend of that training was my first experience of actually suddenly having coming out of hypnosis with the right was that was massive.
Yeah.
And that I talk about a kinesthetic map. Once you've managed to have an experience, if you can focus in on the physical sensations of that experience, then you're now in command of it because you can replicate that physical sensation, which means so from that day on, my ability to meditate and use self-hypnosis was hardwired in.
Mm.
I know what it feels like, which means I can recreate it instantly.
I use your story from time to time when you flew to Australia from New Zealand. You were general manager at the printing company. You had a someone above you at the time who would get under your skin, and then you
By
were sitting.
production,
That's it, and you were sitting in the class, and you were going through all of the processes of NLP and timeline therapy and the hypnotherapy, and you said along the lines of this, what am I this stuff doesn't work. Why am I floating anywhere? Of course, what sort of impact will this have on my life? Yet when you went back into your old environment, you weren't triggered the same way.
yeah,
And that was a bit of a convincer for you.
I call it my Salvador Dali moment, where the
Okay.
world just seemed very, very weird. When I went to do the studies in Australia, and you know anyway, Connor, because you booked me into it,
I
um,
was I was the
you
smooth
were the
voice on the
sales
phone.
professional, and timeline therapy, I was not interested in.
Mm,
I was interested in NLP. I was
mm,
interested in linguistic skills. Influence timeline therapy, what was that?
mm.
And float above your timeline, I was thinking, geez, next you're going to have me gazing at crystals or maybe skipping in the woods with flowers in my hair. So I was at a place in my life where that sort of stuff was airy fairy nonsense. So when we were at the training and we went through that whole process, from a logical perspective, the way that it was trained, it made sense. And on my particular training, there was a guy, not dissimilar to you and I, Connor. There was a guy who was an ex-NFL player, and he was built. His arms were bigger than my thighs, although that's not particularly hard with my twigs. But he was a fairly fella.
Was this
And
in
he was
America or in Australia?
in Australia. And we bonded and we had a good laugh and, we had the same sarcastic humor. And when it came to the demonstration, who's got anger and those who've got anger is willing to let go of anger today, put up your hand. And, and there's all the zealots who are keen to, oh, me, pick me, pick me. So he put his hand up and I was sitting beside him and I looked at him and think, what are you putting your hand up for? And they asked round, and how do you know you got anger? Oh, yeah, good. How do you know you've got anger? And then they got to him, and when they asked him, very quickly, pretty much all of us went, well, all right, we can, okay, it's not that far under the surface. And so he was invited, would you be willing to be the demo subject? Yeah, sure. So he went up onto the stage, and I thought that was madness at the time. He then went through the process, and it was my first experience of seeing somebody he was the classic sadness under anger. The minute the anger released, he wept deeply at a guttural level. Yeah. And everybody was sort of, it was one of those demos that was phenomenal, but not that great for the training because everybody then became a bit frightened of the process. And he was in a position where I thought, that was impressive. That was impressive. But then we had to do the exercise. And I was still of the mindset, even though I'd seen that. And I thought, that's impressive, but it's still nonsense. So when I went to do it, I was in a quandary where I thought, how am I going to do this? I don't believe in it. I don't think it's right. I don't think there's any reason for me to do it. Do I want the experience of it? Well, not really. Do I want to learn how to do it? Yeah. Okay, I'll have to work with somebody. So I did something that I don't recommend people to do, but having said that, it worked well for me. I decided I would just pretend to do it.
Oh, yeah.
I thought, what harm is there in that? I'll just pretend to do it. Yeah. And so when they said, the classic, ask your unconscious mind, are you willing to let go of anger today and be aware consciously? Yes, I said. And then they went into what's the root cause of this emotion, the first event, which when disconnect causes the problem to disappear if you know it was before, during, after your birth. Because before my birth was not congruent for me, I then said after, and then they said, good, what age were you? And I know it now. At the time, it didn't mean anything to me. But when I was asked what age I was, I saw a bedroom chest of drawers with a large pink neon 2 on it.
Okay.
That's what so I just said 2. So then we started the process. Float above your tongue, over the past, position 1, face the past. When you get there, notice the event, let me know when you're there. Yeah, I'm there. Just making up. And then, of course, they got ask your unconscious mind, what do you need to learn from the event? The learn which your unconscious mind will be able to let go of the emotion easily if you know what's the learnings. And I thought, I'll just make it up. So again, I made it up. Good, wonderful, sounded great. Now float to position 3, where you're above and before the event, looking towards now. Make sure you're well before you change the event, so later right event. Ask yourself, now where's the emotion? Gone, I announced. And then he said, good, right, float down inside the event, directly in position 4, gone, brilliant, float up to position 3, come back to now as quickly as you can let go of all the emotion, all the way back to that. And that was dilemma number 3, where I thought, I wonder how long he thinks I should keep my eyes closed for. I make sure I tell my students, you don't need to close your eyes. I thought you had to, but you don't. But I thought, I wonder how long he thinks I should take to do this. So I thought, I'll give it a couple of minutes. Now, during that time, killing time, I saw an old-fashioned Rolodex, and I was like flicking, flick, 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 stop, flick, 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 stop, flick, 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 stop. On every card I stopped at, there was writing. I have no idea what the writing said. I paid little or no attention to it. We finished the process. We did the same thing for sadness, fear, hurt, and guilt. Lovely, wonderful. Training was great. I went back to my life as a sales manager in a printing company, which is what it was. And then I had that experience, which was, it was about a week and a half later. And Cameron, who was the production manager, he was a university graduate, and I had been the production manager of the largest printing company in Australasia as a career. And I can only presume he felt threatened by me, but he would always attack, and he would use his intelligence and intellect to be rather unpleasant. And on that particular day, he always used to frustrate me. He always used to anger me. In fact, prior to the training, if I was coming back from Auckland with a job, or there had been a change where I was going to have to pull the job, it wasn't going to go in the schedule, I wouldn't phone him until I was 20 minutes outside Tauranga, because I'd learned I was a danger to myself. I would phone him. He would be a rude, arrogant, sarcastic pig, and I would drive like a lunatic because I was enraged by him. But a week and a half after training, he came up, ranted on at me, threw this job bag on the floor, turned on his heels, marched out my office. And I was left in that moment where I sort of was like, oh, something weird's happened. And then the realization, the weird thing was, I wasn't pissed off. I wasn't angry. I didn't feel offended. I was sweet as a nut. I felt great. Didn't bother me. And then the second revelation for me, which was a massive lesson, is I went downstairs and put myself in harm's way. Went to see him in his office to say, what exactly is the problem, Cameron? And for the first time ever in my entire life, I just listened. Just listened. I didn't feel compelled to jump in. I didn't feel compelled to push back or defend. I just listened. And in doing that, obviously a technique we'd also learned, I allowed him to empty out. And what else, Cameron? Emptied out, emptied out. By the third time, he'd done a 180. He was saying I was the only one that understood the pressure he was under. I was the only one that knew how to lay up a job properly for the press. I was the only one that gave reason frames on printing. And he ended up praising me and telling I was brilliant. And my life changed on that day. It gave me a very visceral, real experience of doing it differently.
Since that day.
Pardon me?
How long has it been since that day?
That was in 2007.
Not quite, but nearly 20 years. It's it's fascinating for me because I see where you are now. You're working, high level executives, people in C-suites, and the question for me, because we often see out front on social media the people that are on stage, the people that are transforming and making an impact on the stage, but we don't often see the secret squirrels that are working behind the scene, making sometimes an even bigger impact on the decision makers in these, in these organizations. So I guess what's really fascinating to me is is you had that experience as someone who was an upper level manager. You had the experience of your arrogance at the time and your sense of this is garbage and this is, woo woo stuff. You didn't say that word, but I guess that's my word that explains it.
Yeah, that's how it felt.
Crystals and running in the forest with flowers in your hair, I think is what.
Is that perception still around? And where are we now in terms of
I don't experience it, because when people come to me, whether it's a business owner or an executive or it's somebody for one-to-one coaching, my whole approach is incredibly down to earth. And I have a foundational belief from that day. If I can get it, if I can go through those processes, if I can understand getting in touch with the emotional, the unconscious subliminal emotional drivers and associations I may have, then anyone can. So how I sell it, and because as a coach, you're in sales. Everything is sales. So when I'm selling the concepts and ideas to the individual that I'm working with, I'm selling it to them in their language, driven by their understanding and perception of reality, and allowing them to see it in their world being different. And it's an incredible practical way of operating with individuals. And as a coach, as you know, you have to develop an enormous flexibility. I have a wide suite of individuals that I work with who are all completely different. Yet the results I get with them and the connection I have with them and the trust that I can develop and maintain with them, where they take on board my advice consciously and unconsciously. Some are unaware of the changes they're creating unconsciously. And again, that's conversational hypnosis. That is the basis of Milton model. Some are well aware. In fact, nowadays I'm in a position where I can talk about something to a client and they'll suddenly go, "Is that a metaphor about me?" It wasn't, but it is now. So I will always go, "No, not necessarily." And again, they're in a position where they created their own, they were guided to their own solution, but in a story that was unrelated, that I wasn't actually using in the coaching process at the time. But
Specifically for
again,
them.
utilization, I was pattern number 19 in Mill model. That is what we're doing. If it's there, we may as well leverage it and utilize it.
Yeah. And I mean, gosh, fast forward 15, 16, 17 years. For those that don't know, Colin and I used to work together in Australia. I headhunted him as such and flew him across from NZ, and we worked together. And Colin was instrumental in my growth in sales. With your sense of humor that you were able to use on the phone and being yourself. And I talk a lot about this now with Callum, and we both share this and teach about being your authentic self, especially in business and in sales. And obviously, Tad was an influence that we got to get plugged into, Tad James. But I only saw Tad, 2 months of the year, and he was on stage, never in the office. So the only, time I would spend with him was mainly in the training room. I mean, every now and then he would come into the office and the like. But it was more. I mean, Tad wasn't mentor and coach. He was coming in to be with his team and spend time with the people that worked really hard for him and his company. So working next to you, Colin, and hearing you talk to prospects in your office, the rapport you were able to build with them was phenomenal. And you did it without being some, schmarmy, squeaky, manipulator in sales. You did it being yourself and fully believing in the person you work with. and seeing the magnificence in them and getting that to shine through. And that's what the people were, they got lit up and they moved towards that.
Hey guys, Colin and Connor here from Connect Coaching. I hope you're enjoying this episode of the Unplugged podcast. We're jumping in to let you know about something really exciting, the Forever Client Matrix.
Absolutely. What we love doing is lighting people up and helping them realize that their future is bright and, most importantly, making a difference in this world. So we are very excited to be able to share this with you.
If you want to turn every prospect into a forever client, then please click on the link below in the description and get instant access now to your preview of the Forever Client Matrix.
Enjoy.
You must be authentic. We're highly trained. I use that. So when I start working with any client, fairly early on in the piece, within the first 20 minutes, I'll tell them there's 3 things that you cannot bullshit. Number 1 is yourself. You cannot bullshit yourself. You always know. And the problem is people, when they try to bullshit themselves, they create incongruency. They're no longer authentic. They're no longer aligned. That's why they start to create a problem. Now, the second, because of that, you resonate. So the universe is not fooled. You cannot fool the universe. Whatever you are, the universe knows. And the third thing is me. When I'm working with somebody, if you don't tell me the truth, I will know. Because it's impossible for you to say something that's incongruent without making a mess of it, either in the structure of the language you choose to use unconsciously or your physiology or the tone of your voice. It will not be aligned, and I will know. And I believe your prospect, when you're selling, if you're not authentic, they know. They might not be able to describe it. They might not be able to give you a description consciously as to what they felt or what was going on, but they will know. The ChatGPT is a fantastic tool that everybody should use, but they should use it for ideas. They should use it for inspiration. They shouldn't use it to sell themselves through, because that's not them. Ultimately, people will come and see us, whether it's one-to-one coaching, whether they're coming to a training. They'll have created an internal representation of who you are and what you are. And
what's an internal representation, just for the people who are listening in and are not trained in NLP? What's an internal representation?
It's what you believe the world is. So we gather experiences through our 5 senses: visual, auditory, kinesthetic, olfactory, and gustatory. We have a 6th sense, which is we call it audio digital, but it's awareness. What's the awareness you have, or that you're choosing to have, of the reality you think you're experiencing? And because we can't process true reality, and again we use the Mihai Csikszentmihalyi reference from the book Flow, the universe, the internet is full of different equations, but they all pretty much are saying the same thing. Reality is made up of a vast amount of information, and our neurology can only process a very small portion of that. So that bombardment of our neurology and our experiences, our emotional associations, our limitations, all of those life experiences that we've had today is what we process that data through, which distorts, deletes, and generalizes it. And then we get an internal representation, nanoseconds after the experience, of what we believe the experience was. And ultimately, if that's not working for you, well, the good news is it's not real anyway. It's your perception of it. That's why I make such a big thing with anybody that I train, whether it's corporate coaching or not. Presuppositions. What's real, what's not? What do you know for fact? There's 3 steps to it. I was talking to a client this morning about it. What do you know for fact? That allows you to acknowledge what you don't know. And then you want to be discerning and clever about what you need to know, because we don't need to know everything. We need to work out in this current experience or situation, what do I need to know? And the first step is recognizing I'm making this up. There's no evidence to support what I believe I'm experiencing right now. Evidence that I have to support it. So we should get I tell my clients, I've over the years, Colin, I've simplified the model. And I think I've got it down to about as simple as you can get it. And there's two things you have to learn to do well. Just two.
Oh, yeah.
If you perfected these two things, and all the tools we train help people perfect these two things. But if you perfect these two things, you will never have a problem. Would you like to know what the two things are?
Oh, we're just about to take a break. No,
I'll
no,
tell
no.
you
Just
how.
joking. I want to know. That's when we would
Uh,
kick in to.
Number
Um,
one is you have to learn to love, accept, and respect yourself. If you love, accept, and respect yourself, you're not going to create a problem for yourself. You know, think of having a child. You love and accept and respect your child. You don't go out of your way to create a problem for your child, because that's not how that model works. And to help you do that better, you need to get very good at being able to process honestly and accurately, those are the two important words, the internal and external feedback loop. I take an action, I create a result. Is the result good, bad? What's the world telling me it is? And how do I feel about it? You know, again, one of my clients this morning, he has a tendency or can have a tendency to work really hard, create what is actually really quite good results, but feel that he's not doing enough and he's failing and he's a bit of a fraud. And I thought there's a mismatch.
is that when you said fraud, you mean, well, could it also mean a bit like imposter syndrome?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
exactly impossible.
Okay.
Yeah. So he's constantly striving for a success that he will never truly actually acknowledge. So no
Interesting.
matter what level of success he's creating, he has to date not managed to acknowledge, appreciate, accept, rejoice, celebrate that success, because it's never enough. But he needs to understand it's never going to be enough without a shift in how he is willing to process through that internal, external feedback.
Mm.
It's congruent.
And number two,
That is number two.
So number one is love, respect, and something yourself.
Accept,
articulate the other.
not something yourself, accept yourself.
Yeah.
And number two is to be able to process accurately and honestly the internal, external feedback. Now, all of the tools that we train, whether it be with private clients or in commercial training, or if we train it corporately, doesn't matter. It's the same principles, it's the same processes.
Mm.
We're teaching people tools and skills that allow them to look at what's my internal representation of the reality I'm experiencing, and what evidence do I have to support that's true. Now, we do that through our emotional feedback, but we also do it through our linguistics. It's the structure of language we're choosing to use.
Mm.
Can't hide from that. You know, if there's any doubt, when I was in China just the other week there doing round of corporate training and coaching.
Are you able to share who that is with? Because it's a bit of a mini arc within this.
There's a little bit of a
podcast.
link, yes. So, you actually recommended somebody to me,
Mhm.
and they were looking for coaching for someone else here in the UK.
Mhm.
When I spoke to that person, you had already primed me by saying, you may know the person because they did appear on the pre-study kit. Well, their name was certainly used within the
Yes.
pre-study kit. That used to be Tad's
Yeah, yeah.
pre-study.
So for any, I mean, a lot of our listeners are have known Callum and myself through our NLP days, and we would all listen to an NLP audio collection before you learn NLP that Tad created. And one of the metaphors, or one of the real life examples that Tad uses, is with a gentleman by the name of Gordon Stiles. Now, Gordon at the time was living in England, and Tad worked with Gordon and his team. And he references Gordon in the pre-study collection. So obviously, listening to the pre-study collection, the name is unique, and it sticks in your mind, stuck in my mind. So when he contacted me, I thought, oh, this is pretty cool. It's the Gordon from the audios, and here we are, nearly 20 years later, and he's still in a way working with
The
Tad's
profound,
teachings.
so the profound impact that it had on Gordon is something that he's rolled out across his businesses throughout the years. He now has an incredibly successful business in China, 250 staff, very strong, well-structured management team. So in the conversation that I had with them, which would have been 3 years ago now, it piqued his interest because of my background in production management, in business, and the practical way that I talk about all of the tools that we teach, but how you would apply them in real practical terms, especially in business. And we started working together, and that has developed. So I've been to China twice for the yearly sales conference, done several trainings, done, you have your wonderful sales training. I have a sales training that I use, that I actually created initially to deliver to Gordon's international sales team. And it's gone from strength to strength from there. So now I have a very strong coaching relationship with all the senior management team within that company, which
Very nice.
takes me to China. So it's all about practical application. The skills that we've learned over all these years, some people are capable of using them better than others. Some people, we know people out there, and we won't say a one-trick pony, but they certainly know the tools and techniques from one content, how they learned them, and they could certainly talk about the application from that perspective. Masterful training and masterful coaching comes from being able to understand the real life application and the many facets of how it can be utilized, and being able to pinpoint what is required, the biggest effect you can have. Richard Bandler once said that to create a change for somebody, you would just need to think of the perfect reframe for them. So if you were able to deliver the perfect reframe for that individual in that context that fitted for their sense of and skewed sense of reality, they would change. Yeah, it's possible. The reason we have all the tools, and I say to most of my clients, we talk about letting go of emotions. Yeah, well, natural resolution is already hardwired into our neurology. We've all experienced it. We've all had an experience that bent us out of shape. And then we talk about it 3 months later and it still bends us out of shape. We talk about it a year later, it still bends us out of shape. And then we find ourselves talking to somebody 3 years later and they're talking about a context similar and it reminds you, and you start talking about it, but then it seems funny. Not only does it seem funny, but you're sometimes at a loss as to why it bent you out of shape. You heard yourself saying it. That used to really bother me, but now I can't think why. Now, that's natural resolution. We gained an unconscious wisdom that allowed us to let go of the emotion. So we know the human neurology is capable of doing it by itself, and we know it's capable of doing it instantaneously. It's just how many people could you convince that of? So we've got a beautiful vehicle that allows us to take them through a process. Now, it's easy to coach somebody to a place where they believe in the process. And then we've got that fundamental, well, you've gone through the process, so that must have happened then. So that's the whole presupposition model, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's where we win. So you can do it yourself, you could, but can we predict that's going to happen? No, we can't. So can we take them through a process where they could do it with volition today? Yes, we can.
Similar to your experience back in 2007.
Really. I changed without even knowing I needed to change.
And this kind of brings me back to the two-step process that you have. And my question is for step number 2 is that for you, or for you to be able to articulate that to the world outside of
So it's not a process, it's a principle.
So it's the same.
So the process that goes into that, so the process of being able to love, accept, and respect yourself, well, that's NLP, that's timeline therapy, that's hypnosis, that's therapeutic coaching. How to get to the place where you can let go of all these limitations or the things that have held you back. How you can go through that process and be in a place where you can actually genuinely love, accept, and respect yourself, then that's the process. The principle is loving, accepting, and respecting yourself. Same with the model of being able to honestly and accurately process through the internal external feedback loop. That model that concept is a principle. The process of doing it is sensory awareness, linguistic skills, acknowledging emotions, naming the emotion, not conceptualizing around the emotion. So the process is all the things we teach. So those two principles are what you're aiming to get through. That said, there's lots of processes you would probably be best supported in learning and perfecting and mastering, so that those principles could be easily attained.
I mean, I'm conscious of time here, and it's late where you are as well, Colin. With the two principles, is that cross contextualized in a personal capacity and a corporate capacity? Would
Everything.
part of this? How could you tell a CEO or someone who's in charge of 250 employees that you have to love, respect, and accept yourself?
Yeah. So that's called rapport. So
when you're dealing with the old you back before.
Yeah. So the old me would have had to have engaged with someone that I could recognize as a kindred spirit, but also respect. It would have to be a mentor figure that I saw value in, or I wouldn't have listened. Our job as coaches and as trainers is to gain that connection and rapport as quickly as possible and to continue to maintain it. So we use metaphor. We use our own life experiences as metaphor. We look to have that person recognize, I am just like you. And this is how I was, and this is how I am now. And our job, unlike some trainings out there, our job is to teach them how to do it. Our job is, don't give them a fish, teach them to fish. We've not been successful if they continually require us. There has to be a point where they fly the nest.
Indeed.
I believe very much in the experts that train people should be there to support them. I always say to my clients with breakthroughs, you're going to go out into your world and you're going to have new experiences. Yeah, because the world's going to be different. And you're going to think, Hey, what? How did that happen? So you need a guide to be there to check back on and say, is this normal? Yes, it is. The three requisites for change, I think, are important, but I may be being a bit cynical here. I think
True.
they were created. I think they were created as a get out of jail free card. Because requisite number 2, requisite number 3, take action and focus only on what you want is an ability to go, do me now. You let go of negative emotional associations and limitations. You integrated the parts. You created a compelling future. We've done number 1 together. So if you're not feeling great 3 months on, that's your problem, not mine.
Being at
I
cause, I
believe-
think, is one of the prerequisites. So taking that accountability. I'm conscious of time with where we're going. But we would love to. So where can people find you, Colin? We can.
I have several websites, but my Advanced Team Dynamics is the corporate website that I have up and running. There's lots of little freebies that people can sign up for there.
What sort of freebies can they get, Colin?
The 12 fundamentals of leadership.
Excellent.
I've got my take on the 5 principles of success in the goal setting model.
So they could go to advancedteamdynamics.co.uk and read the 12 principles of leadership. And what is it, an audio for the goal setting that you have?
Yeah, so there is my goal setting video.
So video.
As you know, I have an NLP practitioner training online.
Yes.
Which I utilize for my students and I train them. I train all of the stuff that you train. I just train it under a different title.
We no longer train NLP. Is that what you're referring to?
Well, fundamentally, nor do I, but I do.
Got it.
So I believe people need to learn language skills.
Absolutely. Everything's communicated.
I find it very difficult to understand how people could ever effectively communicate in their life, whether it be personal, whether it be corporate, whether it be with their children, if they haven't learned language skills and the more advanced language skills.
So when you're in China teaching people who have English as their second language skills, maybe that's another podcast.
Well, the interesting thing is they're more motivated than most.
Well, I used to find that the people who lived furthest away would always be the first in the training room. People who lived in different countries would always be the first in the training room. People who lived 20 minutes down the road would always come in after the bell rang.
The way I teach language is very practical and I can easily give practical examples that resonate for an individual. Again, just out of sheer experience all the years. And yes, the more advanced stuff for people like that, it's not required. But for those that are keen, that are interested, that really do want to perfect language to the ultimate degree, language in of itself, that's a full 7-day training.
Indeed. So if you want to find Colin, go to Advanced Team Dynamics, pick up some freebies, and maybe call him. He's actually great to have a conversation with over the phone. You never know where it will go. But on behalf of Connect Coaching, sorry, Cal.
I feel like we've only scratched the surface, Colin. Yeah. I'm sitting here in awe of a lot of the stuff you're saying. So I would like to, rebook this at some point and maybe allow a longer period of time for it, so that we can really get into some of the more technical side of what you're saying, because you're obviously a technician with the wealth of experience. And I think that for our listeners, it would be of great value to document that.
I have an unwavering passion for it, and I've had that unwavering passion for it since 2007. Part of the reason I have an unwavering passion for it is my affiliation with Connor. Connor was one of the first people I worked with that I very much admired his dedication, his integrity, and his skill with the processes. the language has fascinated me from the beginning of time. So I've dedicated myself to the study of it, and I love it. And I love the opportunity to share with people the ways that they can view their life differently today and make a change to the results that they're creating.
Thank you, Colin.
Thank you for jumping on.
Pleasure.
Late notice, but we will absolutely have you back. Thank you again. And this is Connect Unplugged number 10, calling it a day, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone,
Colin.
for tuning in.
Cheers.
Hey guys, Colin and Connor here from Connect Coaching. I hope you're enjoying this episode of the Unplugged podcast. We're jumping in to let you know about something really exciting. If you are a practitioner, a coach, or a trainer in the alternative therapy modality space, the Forever Client Matrix is something that we've modeled in the last 30 combined years, both Connor and my experience. And we've turned it into a 2-day intensive, and we want to give you a preview of that Forever Client Matrix.
Absolutely.
We want to make the bar for them to enter into that program very, very low and have them get incredible results.
I've sold about $40 million worth, and together we've sold about $100 million worth with our teams.
That's right. We believe that trust and reliability is the currency of the future. So if you want to turn every transaction into a transformational experience, if you want to turn every prospect into a forever client, then please click on the link below in the description and get instant access now to your preview of the Forever Client Matrix.
Enjoy.